What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm back here once again for another comprehensive preview for the NBA player props that you need to know about for this upcoming slate on the NBA. I'll be taking you through Outlier.bet. I know a lot of you guys have been taking advantage of that free trial, so the link is still in the description box below, so check it out. A lot of you guys have been signing up. What I wanted to do in this video is show you how I set up the app, what filters I use to really make a short list. I will still be going through it game by game. We're going to make our selections based off a few things: recent form, matchups, and how they performed against that team in the past. So let's jump into it and let's find some bangers. Let's go. All right, so we've landed on the props page of Outlier.bet. Obviously, at the top here, you can see all the different games that are available. We'll be going through them all one by one. The first thing that I like to do is pick the different props that I want to look at, because there's a lot of data on here. It can be overwhelming at first, but what I will usually like to pick, I like to play the first quarter markets, assists, points and assists, points and rebounds, PRAs, rebounds and assists, steals and blocks. I have seen some good plays on those, but every time I played them, they haven't worked for me. So these are the main ones that I like to look at. And my favorite feature of this is filtering by odds. So as you know, I don't like to take any old prop, any old over and under. I really like to filter it by minus 110 odds. If sometimes I even go plus 100 because I'm really about that value. So those are the main filters I set up. I also like to filter to the over. The under does have some value, but that's not how I start my betting selection. I usually like to start with the over. Once I've made my final selections, I'll go back and then I'll check all the games based off the unders on the same filters just to see if anything stands out to me. But unders do have a great rate of hitting, but the experience for me is what's important, and I don't like that whatsoever. So we've got our filters set up. Let's jump into the very first game. We're looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers versus 76ers. So what I tend to do is leave it on these filters. You can go 5, 10, head-to-head, whatever it is. Eventually, you're going to find all the players that you need anyway. But let's jump into Tobias Harris first. And the first thing I like to do is check out the injuries to see who's out and who's in. So we know that Donovan Mitchell, he's a game-time decision. And for the 76ers, the same outs. D'Anthony Melton, he might be back after fracturing his back. I don't think he'll have too many impacts on this game, and other players. So Donovan Mitchell's the main thing that we need to keep in consideration as we look through this game. Now, for Tobias Harris, recently just lost a prop on his. We did look at his first quarter rebounds. He had a great hit rate. He had done it against the Knicks in the past. Then he got no rebounds in the first quarter. So that was a little bit disappointing. In this particular matchup, he hasn't done well first quarter rebounds against the Cavs, so I wouldn't even consider that. But let's have a quick look at his points prop. I also like to filter by his position. So he's normally a 3 or a 4. So he could have a good or a bad matchup depending on how the lineup is. So you've got to take both into consideration. Points prop wise, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 though. So that doesn't get me excited whatsoever. Head-to-head matchups, he did score 23 points in his last game against Cleveland, but he did go under the 3 times prior. That last game was in November of last year. Joel Embiid would have been playing in that one. So his points prop doesn't really interest me. Looking at his assists, you can see he's gone under his assists in all 4 games against the Cavs. Looking in the last 10, he's hit it in 5 out of his last 10 games. So even that leaves me a little bit 50-50. I'm on the fence. So no obvious play there. And let's have a look at his rebounds. Rebound-wise, he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, and he's gone under in every game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So one thing I do know about Tobias Harris is that I don't like him that much. That might be a little bit rude to say, but looking at his PRA, his overall line is 28.5. So he's gone under that in 4 straight games against Cleveland, despite scoring 23 points against them earlier this season. In his last 10 games, he's gone over in 5 of his last 10. So I was hoping those numbers would be a little bit stronger because I really wanted to take an under on Tobias Harris, but it doesn't look like that's going to be happening. His form over the last 10 is not bad. It's just wildly inconsistent. So Tobias Harris, we're going to have to pass. So instead of jumping through each and every single player the way I normally do, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. And this is for a lot of you guys who are using Outlier. This is how I tend to filter through a lot of the bets, and I do it a lot quicker. So looking at the last 10 games, that's a pretty important stat for me. So anyone who's got a good hit rate over their last 10 games, then I'll be sure to jump in. So let's have a look at Donovan Mitchell here. So his points props at 27.5. So in terms of the matchup, the 76ers ranked 16th in the league in points allowed to shooting guards. Donovan Mitchell's covered this line in 7 out of his last 10 games. Not his first game back. He didn't play today, did he? No, he didn't play today. So he was out, I believe, against the Magic. But Donovan Mitchell, so he's covered in 7 out of his last 10 head-to-head games against Philly. Scored 36 points against them in their very last matchup. I think that was only 10 days ago, so that was before the break. 21 prior to that, 33. So what are the trends here? The last game was a home game. This one is a road game against the Philadelphia 76ers. We can see in the last 4 games, he's only had 1 road game against Philly. He scored 33 points. If we look at his last 10 road games, we can see he's only covered this in 3 out of his last 10 games. So that doesn't give me much confidence. Also, we know that Donovan Mitchell, game time decision due to an illness, right? So we've got to learn my lesson. So I bet on Isaiah Hartenstein, who was a game time decision today, and then he barely played. So Donovan Mitchell, even though he's done, you could say, okay in his last 10 games, he hasn't done the best on the road covering this line. And in head-to-head matchups, it's a bit 50-50. So that makes me quite hesitant to make a play on Donovan Mitchell. Looking at who we have, Tobias Harris, rebounds and assists. So we know that he's wildly inconsistent, so we don't want to touch that. Let's have a flick over to the players who've done well covering their lines over their last 5. So as I look through this, we can see that Tyrese Maxey, first quarter assists comes to mind. What I like about this, it's plus 100 odds. So in his last 5 games, he's covered this 4 times. 4 out of his last 5 games, he's gotten 2+ assists in the first quarter. In terms of the matchup, the Cavs, they actually allow the fewest assists to point guards in the league this season. So that alone makes me a little bit hesitant. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he had 5 assists in the first quarter the last time these guys played, 10 days ago, which is pretty crazy. So that does lean to the over. That was a road game as well. Looking at it, so last 5, he's hit it 4 out of his last 5, but he's only hit it in 5 out of his last 10. So that's quite interesting. This is a home game for Philly, so let's check his last 10 home games. And in his last 10 home games, he's hit this 5 times. So the only reason you probably would take this for Tyrese Maxey is that over his last 5 games in general, he's hit this 4 times. And in his last head-to-head game, he hit it. So those are the only reasons you would take it. I'm not seeing enough of a correlation here for me to take it. But look, up to you. If that sounds interesting, you might want to have a run at it. The next player who's doing okay with the last 5 games is Paul Reed. Now, his name came up for PRA and points. So I'll check both of those lines out for Paul Reed. Firstly, in terms of centers, we know that it's a tough matchup for points, an average matchup for rebounds, and a tough matchup for assists. But in his last 5 games, he's covered this in 4 of them. The only game he went under was against the New York Knicks. And that was today. And today, he played 22 minutes. 22 minutes, a little bit low. 4 out of his last. So he was killing it prior to the break. He's come back, had a quiet game against the Knicks. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he had 22 PRA in his last game against Cleveland. 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 1 assist. Now, looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this 5 times. Let's check his last 10 games at home. Last 10 games at home, he's only covered this twice. So, again, these numbers aren't popping out to me. They're not very strong. But let's check out his points line. So 4 out of his last 5, but only 4 out of his last 10. So he's been playing in Joel Embiid's position for a bit longer than this, but it's clear that he's probably getting the lion's share of minutes here. And he scored 13 points the last time he versed Cleveland. The matchup, somewhat difficult. So even though his more recent form is very good, there's not enough reason for me to take Paul Reed in this one. The next player I want to look through, let's check out Tyrese Maxey's rebounds. So the rebound line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 4 straight games. 9 against the Wizards, 4 against the Cavs, 6 against the Heat, and then 6 against the Knicks. In terms of matchup, the Cleveland Cavaliers allow the 5th fewest rebounds to point guards on the season. Tyrese Maxey's covered this in only 5 out of his last 10. So that the last 4 games, probably a driving factor as to why you would take this. In terms of head-to-head matchups, he has covered this in 3 consecutive games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So now you've got a bit of interest from me. So I don't mind that. So we know that you're getting plus money. I do like that. Form against the Cavs, I do like that as well. Recent form is good. I do like that. I did wish it was a lot better, but looking at his last 20, you'd probably lean at the under. He's hit this in only 8 of his last 20, but over his last 4 games in particular, he has been rebounding quite well. So this would definitely be a lean for me at the moment, but I don't hate this. That's what I'm going to say about Tyrese Maxey. Scrolling through to see if there's anything else that we like if we're looking at the over, and there's nothing there. So then what you can do is flip to the under. If there's not a lot that we like for the over, there might be a lot that we like for the under. Let's just put it that way. So looking at the last 10, you want to fade Tyrese Maxey. Under 31.5 points and assists. He's hit the under in 6 out of his last 10. We know the matchup is a difficult one. Assist-wise, we spoke about it earlier. The Cavs allow the fewest assists to point guards on the season. Maxey's hit this in his last 2, though. His last 2 games have been scoring the ball really well. So that's what makes me very hesitant to take this play. And in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under this points and assist line in 3 out of his last 4 games against the Cavs. So, but given his recent form, I would have been game enough to take Tyrese Maxey on the under. The other is Tobias Harris, if you're looking at his points and his rebounds. So that line is at 24.5. You get that for minus 105. He's hit 6 out of his last 10. And the matchup, well, it really depends, right? If he's a power forward, the matchup is great. If he's a small forward in this game, it might be a somewhat difficult matchup. So even with that, I want to play Tobias Harris unders because I'm not a big fan of his, but there's nothing screaming out to me for that one right now. What we can also see is lines for Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. Those aren't available just yet, and that's most likely because Donovan Mitchell's a game-time decision. Their performances, they change quite a bit depending on whether he plays or not. So let's jump into the next game. It's the Toronto Raptors versus the Atlanta Hawks. All right, so we're going to jump into Trae Young firstly. He's got a 70% hit rate on his assist prop. So I like this already, and I've only been looking at it for a few seconds. The reasons why I like this, I already know that the Raptors give up a lot of assists to point guards. That's because I do this every single day. I know that they give up a lot of assists. There you go. Ranked 27th in the league in terms of assists allowed, which is the 3rd or 4th most assists to point guards on the season. Now, 11.5 is a high line, but Trae Young's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. I love that you can get this for plus money as well, plus 105. In terms of the head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 6. So this is a home game for the Atlanta Hawks, and we can see he's only had 2 home games against the Toronto Raptors out of his last 6 games, I believe. Yep. And he's had 12 assists in both of those games. So Trae Young at home against the Raptors, he can get this done. Looking at his last 10 home games, though, it's not as convincing. 6 out of 10 nonetheless. So, again, these numbers make me lean to the over. And given that the matchup is good, the odds are nice and positive. I think this is definitely going to be a play that I take. So I do like Trae Young overs. Let's just quickly check the injuries to make sure one of his favorite targets aren't missing, and they're not. So Onyeka Okongwu, he's out for this game, but Clint Capella is back in. So not the biggest loss. He still has a lob threat out there. Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, DeJounte Murray, Bogdanovic off the bench, DeAndre Hunter. He's got a lot of targets, Trae Young. So I do like Trae Young overs in assists. So that's definitely one play that I'm pretty confident I'm going to be taking. But looking through this, what else do we see? RJ Barrett, we can see that he's over in his points, rebounds, and assists. He's hit at a 70% hit rate. So let's start there. RJ Barrett, he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. He only had 24 in his last game against the Brooklyn Nets. 7 assists, which is strong. 5 rebounds, that's average. His points totals were down, though. He played 29 minutes. He shot 5 for 13. So he didn't shoot the ball very well. But in terms of the matchup, it's a pretty good matchup. A lot of green here. So the Hawks ranked 21 in points allowed, 22 in assists allowed, 14 in rebounds allowed. So points and assists is a good matchup here for RJ Barrett. It is a road game. So let's just check out RJ Barrett's last 10 road games. And we can see he's covered this in 6 out of his last 7 road games. So that's pretty optimistic, supporting the bet there. The game he went under was against the Utah Jazz, and the Toronto Raptors were blown out by 30 points. And in that game, he only shot the ball 9 times, played 30 minutes, so he wasn't too involved in that one. But in this particular game against the Atlanta Hawks, who allowed the 2nd most points overall this season, could be a very high-scoring game with a lot of opportunities. So I don't mind this. RJ Barrett over his PRA. Matchup is okay. His form on the road is good. His form over his last 10 is okay. He doesn't have a recent head-to-head matchup since he's joined the Raptors, but despite that, I still don't mind this for RJ Barrett looking at his PRA. Now, nothing else is screaming out in the last 10 as a major hit rate. So let's filter things through to the last 5 games. And we can see Scotty Barnes' rebounds and assists, and Scotty Barnes' assists do show up. So let's take a look at Scotty Barnes, just his assist total. Now, I like this already. Plus money, plus 110. Give me that. In terms of the matchup, the Hawks are now the 4th most assists to power forwards on the season. Scotty Barnes has hit this in 4 out of his last 5. He's only hit this in 5 out of his last 10, though. And his most recent game against Brooklyn, even though they won by almost 30 points, he only had 3 assists. But I know that Brooklyn, difficult matchup for power forwards. So Scotty Barnes, good chance to bounce back in this one. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 6 games against the Atlanta Hawks. We can see that he's played them 3 times this season. He had 6, and then his last 2, he's had 8 assists both times. So Scotty Barnes to go over his assist prop, I don't mind that. So let's just double check. We've ticked it all off. The matchup is good. His form against the Hawks more recently has been good. Looking at his last 10 games, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5. Let's check him out on the road. Looking at Scotty Barnes on the road. Now that makes me a bit hesitant. He's only hit this in 2 out of his last 10 road games. Just checking to see. His last matchup against Atlanta was on the road, though. And he still got 8 assists in that one. And that was about 3 to 4 weeks ago. So it does make me a little bit more hesitant. But I think, good chance still. I'll probably put this down as a lean for now. What was the other one? We're meant to be looking at rebounds and assists. So his rebounds and assists, very similar. 4 out of his last 5. Has been rebounding the ball extremely well, though. Check that out. 10, 10, 9, 12, and 12. So his line is at 15.5. So what's his rebound? His rebound line is 7.5 as well. Okay. So looking at the matchup, rebound matchup is great. Assist matchup is great too. So the matchup side of things works well. In head-to-head matchups, you can see that he hasn't rebounded well in his last 2 games against the Atlanta Hawks, though. Only 4 rebounds in each game. Assist-wise, he has been getting it done. Let's check his rebounds and assists on the road. He's only hit this in 1 of 10 games on the road. So that sucks. I don't like that at all. So if we were going to play a Scotty Barnes play, it looks like it would have to be his assist prop. So there's Scotty Barnes. Who else is there if we're looking at the last 5? Nothing is screaming out to me. So then the last filter that I would look through is just checking head-to-head, because there's a lot of players who tend to just play well against certain teams, certain matchups. So regardless of their recent form or whatever, it still might be worth playing. So we know that we like Trae Young's assists already, but his points and rebounds prop, he's done very well against the Toronto Raptors. So check that out. This is the head-to-head matchup. We can see that to cover his line of 26.5 points plus rebounds, Trae Young has absolutely murdered this. He's covered this in 5 consecutive games against the Toronto Raptors, which is pretty crazy. And in a lot of these games, in all of these games, he's covered this in points alone. In 2 out of these games, though, he had very strong rebounding efforts, where he's 5 and 4 rebounds. Let's just quickly check his rebound line for this one. His rebound line is 2.5. Okay. Which he's covered in 3 of 6 games. So it might even just be better to look at his points, because his points prop he's killed against the Raptors anyway. But let's check his points and his rebounds, because I want to see his recent form around that, and then we can flick through the 2. So looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. He has gone under in 3 consecutive, though. 3 consecutive games. All-Star break is now over. Looking at the matchup, it's a good matchup for his rebounds, but it's a difficult matchup for his points. So the Toronto Raptors allow the 3rd fewest points to point guards on the season, but players like Trae Young, you can throw that matchup out the window because he tortures the Toronto Raptors, right? Doesn't matter how hard you make the matchup, this man probably still delivers. So having a look at his recent form, we can see that his rebound prop of 2.5, he's only covered that twice in his last 10 games. So if I was going to look at Trae Young, I think I'd probably just look at his points prop. But we do like his assist prop as well. So just looking at his points and assists, let's check that out. Points and assists, he's still covered in 6 out of his last 10. So even the games where he's had massive assist numbers, his points performance was that low, he still wasn't able to cover. So in head-to-heads, he's nailed his
Well, if he's nailing the points prop, it's easy to say he'll nail the assist prop. But check out these points and assist games against the Raptors: 33 and 12, 29 and 9, 35 and 17, 38 and 11. And then his most recent game against them, he had 30 points and 12 assists. So, based on what we're seeing here, I hope I didn't swallow a fly. Based on what we're seeing here, Trae Young absolutely tortures these guys. If you're looking at a single bet, I still like the assist prop a little bit better. But even in the past, I think his scoring against the Raptors has been a lot better. But his assist prop is probably I wouldn't even say it's a safer bet. So this is where you get a little bit torn, and this is why I do pin comments, because even though I do these videos, there's still a lot of things I need to think about despite doing the research. So I'm going to sit on that at the moment. But Trae Young, he definitely comes to mind for some of these props. Another one is DeJounte Murray, over 1.5 rebounds in the first quarter. So the Raptors, they're ranked 12th in terms of rebounds allowed to shooting guards. We can see that he's covered this in 4 out of his last 5 games against the Toronto Raptors. Most recently against them, he only had 1. That was back in December. If we have a look at games at home, so he hasn't played a home game against them since November of 2022. Looking at his last 10, he's only covered this in 3 of his last 10. If we look at his last 10 games at home, he's only covered this twice. So, yeah. The numbers against the Raptors aren't strong enough for me to take DeJounte Murray on that one. Scotty Barnes, we've already gone through Scotty Barnes as well. So with everything else that's happening here, there's nothing screaming out to me on this prop screen. So normally, if I was doing what I would do, we'd go through Emmanuel quickly, we'd go through Jalen Johnson, we'll go through all that, right? But I can already tell you what I would have said is, look, very inconsistent at the moment. Very inconsistent. Sometimes he gets it done against the opponent, yada, yada, yada. So let's jump into the next one. Also, let me know in the comment section, what are your thoughts on this way of presenting it? Does this make sense to you? Or would you prefer me to go back and just preview all the key players? I'd be really open to hearing what you guys think. We're looking at the Clippers versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Actually, let me go back real quick. I want to check the unders. Looking at the unders, what comes up? So if we go over the last 10 games, the under in Trae Young rebounds, we've kind of just gone through that. We've got an under in Emmanuel Quickly's 22.5 points and rebounds. So if you like taking unders, have fun. Firstly, the matchup is actually not good if you want to take the unders for Quickly. The Hawks get absolutely destroyed by point guards. So that makes me hesitant already. He has gone under in 7 out of his last 10, though. So a bit of conflicting data. I don't like taking unders as it is, so probably avoid that. Scotty Barnes, in terms of his points prop, very much the same, right? He's gone under his points prop in 7 out of his last 10 games, but the Hawks allow the second most points to power forwards, and Scotty Barnes has gone over in every single game against the Atlanta Hawks. So that leaves me a little bit hesitant. And who else is there? A lot of Quickly. Okay. Yeah. That's not overly arousing, is it? So let me have a quick head-to-heads. Okay, we're jumping into the Clippers versus the Grizzlies for real now. Looking at the last 10 games. So Vince Williams is somebody that I pretty much bet on every time he plays. And it's usually the same play. It's his points and assists, and this is why. So looking at his points and assists, the line's at 17.5. Now, he's covered this in 9 out of his last 10 games. He's normally a 2 or a 3, and we can see here that the matchup's not great, but it's not a horrible matchup either. So the matchup is okay, is what we can say about Vince Williams. He's hit this in 9 out of his last 10. If we're filtering through to his last 10 home games, he's hit this in 8 out of his last 10, but he's hit this in 6 consecutive home games. So we like that. If we look at the head-to-head form, though, that was his last home game against the Clippers. He only had 6 points and 1 assist. This was back in mid-January, so Desmond Bane would have been playing. So Vince Williams wouldn't have been doing too much, but playing a whole lot of defense. These days, he's still not the greatest ball handler, but probably the best one that they do have. So the head-to-head matchups, I wouldn't put too much stock into that anyway. I've been winning money off Vince Williams purely on taking his recent form. That's his home form. This is his total form. Look, I'm still leaning the over here, and especially if you're going to get minus 108, give me that. Looking at the injuries and game time decisions, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a game time decision in this game. A lot of players are still out, so Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably the main one. So what I'd be interested to look at here is how has he played with and without Jaren Jackson Jr. Last 10 games, without Jaren Jackson Jr. You can see, so this is from 14th of January onwards. So this is when Vince Williams really started to pick up his minutes and his production. Last 3 games without Jaren Jackson Jr., he's killed it. 17 points, 8 assists, 19 points, 5 assists, and 18 points and 7 assists. So he's pretty much covering this line in points alone. His matchup in these games, 2 games against the Knicks. Very good defensive teams, and Vince Williams has played well. Milwaukee Bucks, they're not a great defensive team, but he still played well regardless. His minutes in those games, 35 was pretty much his average. In terms of his field goals attempts, 13, 17, and 11. So made a lot of free throws though. Got to the line, which is good. So yeah, look, I like this. That's him with Jaren Jackson, without Jaren Jackson Jr. And then if we just have a look at the games with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's covered this in 9 out of his last 10. So absolutely loves it. Been getting a lot more assists as of late. His points prop is starting to go down though, scoring slightly less every single time, but his playmaking has also improved. So the other player that I would look at, given the form of these trend lines, we can see he's scoring a little bit less, is just his assists alone. But this has been more of a recent trend. And you can get this for plus money. 5.5, he's plus 115. We can see that he's covered this over his last 5. One thing that I would always look at, if I'm just going to take an assist prop, is around like their potential assist stats. So I had a quick look at this just before. And throughout the season, he's averaging 5 potential assists per game, and he's getting like 2 to 2.5 assists or 3 assists, right? Over this 5-game stretch, he's averaging over 12 potential assists per game, but he's averaging 7.8 assists, which is pretty crazy. So this is not a fluke. He's having more potential assists given the number of outs that they have. So I do like that as well. I'll probably end up playing both because I'm an idiot and I'm greedy like that. But Vince Williams, I do like. Oh, we got another Vince Williams ones that popped up. It's looking at his first quarter points. Over 3.5, you can get that for plus money. He's covered this in 8 out of his last 10 games. So that's pretty good. Let's check his last 10 home games. And he's covered this in 8 of his last 10 home games. That's pretty crazy. The game where he didn't cover it, though, was against the team he's versing today, the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, in that game, he played 8 minutes in the first quarter. Outside of that, he's played more minutes. But look, the recent form is great. Just because he didn't get it done before doesn't mean he can't do it, right? We're asking for 3.5 points. That's 2 layups for Vince Williams. And I wonder how he goes without Jaren Jackson Jr. Maybe he scores a lot in the first quarter without him. Let's have a look. All right. So we know that. Hang on. I've still got the home filter on. Without Jaren Jackson Jr., there are 3 main games that we're looking at, right? The 2 games against the Knicks and against the Milwaukee Bucks. And Vince Williams Jr. has absolutely crushed it without Jaren Jackson Jr. in the lineup in the first quarter. If we have a look with Jaren Jackson Jr., we can see that he's still done well. He's obviously not murdering it, but he's making 2 buckets. He shoots a lot of 3-pointers too, Vince Williams. So, yeah, look, I don't mind this one at all. What I'm going to do with this play, though, it is plus money. I'm going to leave it as a lean for now. So let me type this in. Pretty much leave a note for myself. If Jaren Jackson Jr. is ruled out, then we're going to take it. All right? So if Jaren Jackson Jr. is not playing, Vince Williams overs in the first quarter, I don't mind that. The next player that's popping up here is James Harden, over 5.5 rebounds. I actually just took him for over 5.5 rebounds in the game against OKC. I only took it because we got it for plus money. He did finish on 6, though, which was good. But in this particular one, odds are at minus 105, so that's still not bad. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10. The Memphis Grizzlies, they allow the most rebounds to point guards on the season. So that's all positive. This is a road game for the Clippers. So let's have a look at James Harden's last 10 road games. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 road games. So doesn't mind getting some rebounds when he's on the road. As we saw looking through the injuries, there's nobody missing for the LA Clippers. He was on a back-to-back as well, but he didn't play much of the last quarter given the blowout. The challenge here is his form against the Grizzlies. Check that out. 3 games against the Memphis Grizzlies this season, and he's gone under his rebound line in all 3 games. So that makes me a little bit hesitant to take James Harden over on rebound. So he's done it well on the road. The matchup is a great one, but in 3 attempts against the Memphis Grizzlies this season, he hasn't made it happen once. So, yeah. Look, it's a lean for me right now. James Harden, rebounds. But that's my only reservation before taking this bet. So, look, if you sounds interested, maybe you want to jump on that, but I'm going to lean on that one for the minute. What else do we have? Kawhi Leonard, over 27.5 points plus assists. So minus 104, type of odds that we like. In terms of the matchup, points-wise, it's not bad. Assists, somewhat difficult matchup, but let's have a look at this. Over his last 10 games, he's hit this 7 times. He has gone under in his last 2. Blowout against the Thunder, difficult. And they got blown out against the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. So, and in this game against the Pelicans, they got blown out as well. Interesting. Well, not blown out. They lost by 11. Last 2 games, he's only played 30 minutes, though. So the matchup, somewhat average. His last 10, somewhat average. Looking at head-to-heads, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games against the Grizzlies. I don't like that. He's only played the Grizzlies twice this year, 17 and 26. So that doesn't give me too much confidence at all. If we're going to have a look at last 10 games on the road, he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 road games. That's not too bad. But once again, the only thing working in the favor of this bet is his form over his last 10. The matchup isn't good, and his head-to-head matchup isn't good either. So if there's really 3 things I'm looking for, I'd really need to see at least 2 of those being hit before I consider the bet. Kawhi Leonard doesn't meet that quota. What else do we have to look through? We've got Santi Aldama, over 8.5 rebounds plus assists, minus 109. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 and in 4 consecutive games. Now, Santi Aldama, be playing power forward. The matchup's not bad. Both of these are green. So the Clippers allow the 8th most rebounds and the 11th most assists to power forwards in the season. So the matchup is not a bad one at all. What I'd be interested in seeing is what the breakdown is, his rebound line versus assist line. Because without looking at these, I would have made the assumption his rebound line would be a lot higher than his assist line. But looking in his last 4 games especially, check out these assist numbers, 7, 4, 5, and 3. His rebound numbers, 6, 4, 5, and 3. I would expect his rebound line to be higher than that. So let's have a quick look at that one. So assists, his line's at 3.5. There you go. 3.5, and you can get that for plus money. That looks interesting to me. If we're looking at his rebound line, it's 5.5. 5.5, you can get it for plus 110. Problem is, he's only hit this in 1 out of his last 7 games. So that would make me a bit hesitant. The matchup is pretty good, though. Rebounds against the Clippers, last 2 games he's gone under. Let's have a look at his assists against the Clippers. He's gone under in all those games too. Played 22 to 21 minutes. Looking at his last 3 games are the main ones I want to look at. 29, 21, and 32 minutes as well. So, yeah, it's plus money, but there's not enough form here. So maybe the smarter option is to just take his rebounds and assists, because that we know that he'll get close to. If the lowest he's got in the last 10 is 7, and the line is 8.5, minus 109, it might be worth the risk. I think this game will be somewhat closer. The Memphis Grizzlies are fresh. Clippers on a back-to-back. So looking at his minutes, somewhat inconsistent. Let's play with the filters with Jaren Jackson Jr. So let's check out how he's gone without him. Oh, yeah. Okay. His last 5 games without Jaren Jackson Jr. are all in the green. Just trying to look through which ones were this season. So it's only been 2 games this season, though, without Jaren Jackson Jr., and that's these 2 here, where he had 9 and 10. So not the most convincing data. It's a very small sample size. So if we look at the games with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's still covered in his last 3 games with him or without him. So that comes in. That's just the 5 games, really, last 5 for Santi Aldama. So that's a lean as well. Rebounds and assists. So I don't mind that. Let's see what else we got here. Santi Aldama first quarter rebounds. This is plus money, so I don't mind this. So line's at 1.5. It's plus money. The matchup is a good one. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. Head-to-head matchups, 2 out of his last 5. So, but look, it's only 2 rebounds. If the Clippers start this game off cold, there's a good chance that Aldama can get these rebounds real quick. But this reminds me of Tobias Harris, which I took for today, and it didn't deliver. So I'm not feeling that, but you might be. So feel free to take it. What else is? Let's have a look at the last 5 games. Small sample size, but we're looking at something gold here. Vince Williams, he shows up. James Harden points. So the points line here is 16.5 for James Harden. He has covered this in 4 out of his last 5. Just scored 17 against OKC. In his 3 games against Memphis, he's gone under in all 3. So I don't like that. The matchup, not a good one or a bad one. So I'm not feeling that for James Harden. Whilst we're in here, let's look at his assists because the line keeps dropping. It's now at 7.5. Last game against OKC, it was 8.5. It's been dropping over time, and that's because he hasn't been delivering. The matchup's not good nor bad. He has gone over his assist prop in his last 2 games against the Memphis Grizzlies. But given his recent form and the way the Clippers are playing, James Harden's not necessarily creating. He's passing it to Norman Powell, who's then finding coffee in the corner. So he's getting those hockey assists. He's not getting the last pass, as you could say. So looking at the last 5, nothing else is screaming out to us. We've seen it all before. Let's have a look at the head-to-heads. Anything strong in the head-to-head? So this is one that's quite interesting. I just took a Paul George under in his PRA, which cashed. But what's interesting here is for Paul George, the matchup's okay, but he has absolutely smoked the Memphis Grizzlies in recent times. Check this out. Last 4 games, he's covered his points and assists line. His line's at 25.5. He's covered it in all 4 games. 37 points and 1 assist his last game against the Memphis Grizzlies. But if you look at his last 10 games, he's only hit this twice. So, and it's really his scoring has been the main letdown, which is quite, and this is partly why I've been taking the under. I won't be taking the under on Paul George today because this head-to-head form against the Grizzlies, it does worry me. If he does go under, he goes under, and that's because his form's not great. But then if he absolutely destroys the Grizzlies, I think it's just a cold, hard fact that Paul George loves to destroy the Grizzlies. So I just wanted to show you guys that one. In other head-to-head news, PG, even his rebounds. He rebounds well against the Grizzlies too. 3 out of his last 4. Most recently, only 3. But looking at his last 10, that's quite inconsistent. Wouldn't encourage anyone to bet on that. And these other ones, I'm not a fan of breaking down either. So hopefully you guys have noticed the real hack for using Outlier at the moment. And the perfect example is, it's probably not even on this page, really. What you want to see for this, right? You want to see as much green as you possibly can, because what that tells you is their recent form is good, their form against the opponent is good, their form on the season against this line is good. You just have to look to identify why the line is set the way it is. With certain players, role players especially, like Vince Williams, their lines don't move. They're not as sharp as someone like James Harden's are. So that's definitely one thing you want to look for. Throughout the rest of these games, hopefully we can find a good example of that. So let's jump into the next one. Well, actually, let me check the under real quick. Here we go. So Paul George, under 4.5 first quarter points. We see how we got a lot of green right here. Let's have a look at this one. So if you want to fade Paul George, you take the under 4.5 points. You're going to get that at plus money. That cashed in 8 of the last 10 games. And looking at head-to-head matchups, even though, so remember we looked at his total points line and he smoked the Grizzlies in 4 consecutive games? Well, he's gone under 4.5 points in the first quarter in 3 consecutive games against the Memphis Grizzlies. So I can fuck with this one. I don't mind it. Plus money, 4.5. If he makes 1 3-pointer, then I'll be quite nervous. But look, you're not going to sweat too much, right? It's only the first quarter. So you got 12 minutes to win or lose this game. He, on average, only plays 7 to 8 minutes, 7.7 minutes in the first quarter. So based on how their rotations go, he may get less opportunities. We know that Kawhi Leonard is usually the first option. Even Zubac scores a lot of points in the first quarter as well. And Paul George might look to take over late. So I don't mind that one at all. I've talked myself into it. So Paul George, first quarter unders. Okay. So yeah, so that's pretty much what you want to look for in Outlier. If you see these types of numbers, that's pretty much the first players that I would look through. It doesn't require too much research because everything's going to look good. What you then have to factor in is lineups and shit like that. So if we're looking at unders, yeah, that's probably the best under on the cards for this play. But other than that, let's get back into overs and let's jump into the next game. It's the Washington Wizards versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, and we see quite a bit of green up here, and it's for Tyus Jones. So I just had a lean for Tyus Jones over 20.5 points and assists today against the Denver Nuggets, and he absolutely crushed it. I feel like I'm going to bet on him today because I'm sick of leaning on him and then him killing it. So I'd probably be looking at his points plus assist prop. I think that's 21.5, but we'll go through Tyus Jones anyway because a lot of his shit looks green. Firstly, on the point side of things, he's hit this in 8 of his last 10. The line is 12.5. Price minus 108. The matchup, Not a good matchup, but not a bad matchup either. So we can take that against the OKC Thunder. His last game against them, he scored 18 points against the OKC. So he has scored against OKC quite well. His last 10 is pretty good. Last 5 is excellent. This is a road game, so let's just check him out on the road. Last 10 road games, he's hit this in 6 out of 10. He's hit this in 5 consecutive road games. He's averaging 32.6 minutes. So, yeah, I think firstly, points, I don't mind that. I think that's a pretty good prop. I want to now look at his assists because I think it's going to be quite green. And it is. So one thing I'll call out here with Tyus Jones, this line has moved up. Once upon a time, and what I mean by that is only a week or 2 weeks ago, sorry, him and his brother, they both had assist lines of 6.5, guaranteed almost every single night. Tyus Jones went on this hot streak and he was covering it with ease, and that line has only climbed. So this last game against Denver, his line was 7.5, and he obviously smashed that with 14, despite losing by 20 points. Now that line is at 8.5, and it's minus 119 odds. So it's starting to get a little bit juice and a little bit high. So his recent form is excellent. The matchup is okay. I'm just not sure if I'm willing to take that much for his assists. He did get 9 assists the last time they played OKC, but that makes me a little bit hesitant to take because that is a little bit high for my liking. So for me, I'd probably look at points plus assists for Tyus Jones, 21.5, minus 111. We know that he could make, if he kills it with assists, that's extra stuff that can carry your points. But we also know that he's very well capable of covering his points prop, right? It's only 12.5. So, yeah, this is probably the one that I'll probably lean to the most. Points and assists, his matchup is both good. So, Tyus Jones, that's definitely one that I've got down on my list. Who else is there looking at their last 10? So, Kyle Kuzma, we see he's hit 70% of his points and rebounds prop in his last 10 games. He has struggled against OKC in the past, though, so let's check that out. 7 of his last 10. The matchup for points is difficult. He's got a decent matchup for rebounds, though. In head-to-head matches, he did cover in his last game against OKC. That was about 4 weeks ago. 22 points and 15 rebounds. My Lord. And then prior to that, these 2 games were last season, so I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Yeah, so looking at his last 10, he has had some strong rebounding games, but his rebounding is inconsistent. And he's also had some excellent scoring games, but that's wildly inconsistent as well. So welcome to the Kyle Kuzma show. Road game for the Wizards. Let's check his last 10 road games. Last 10 road games, he's only covered in 5 of his last 10, but he has covered in 4 of his last 5 road games. So last one was against the Denver Nuggets, 31 points, 12 rebounds. Did that move for Jordan Poole to the bench? Is that a beneficial thing for Kyle Kuzma, perhaps? So I do not know the answer to that, but this is a lean for me. I honestly don't mind this, right? But I don't like betting on Kyle Kuzma. So that's my one reservation for taking Kyle Kuzma. But you might think otherwise. So over the last 10, nothing else is screaming out to me there. Looking at a shorter sample size, just in their last 5. So we know Tyus Jones is there. Marvin Bagley to get 1.5 assists. Oh, this is a very juicy play. Plus 160. So he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5. The matchup is pretty good. The Thunder allow the 3rd most assists to centers. 4 out of his last 5, but only 5 out of his last 10. Doesn't have a head-to-head matchup to call out. Really, this is a coin flip because I couldn't tell you whether this is going over or under, right? But sometimes I take bets like this purely because I feel like it should be a 50-50. It should be a toss of a coin. It should be a pick 'em. Plus 100 is where the odds should be. But if you're getting plus 160 for something that looks like it happens 50% of the time, it might be worth taking. Now, one thing to keep in mind, in his last 20 games, hit this 8 out of his last 20. But then I like to look at how long has he been playing for the Washington Wizards? Since here. So that's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 games he's played for the Washington Wizards, and he's hit this in 7 out of 12 games, which is above 50%, right? So I think if you're just doing the mathematics here, we know that matchup is good against OKC. We know that his form in his last 5 games is good. Really, his form since joining the Washington Wizards is good in terms of covering this prop. He is not a playmaker by any stretch of the imagination. But if I had a chance to play this exact bet 100 times, I would take it 100 times for Marvin Bagley. Because let's just say he hits this bet 50 times. If you hit this bet 50 times out of 100 at plus 160 odds, you're going to be making profit, my friend. So for that, I'm going to put that on my list of leans. I don't mind that. Marvin Bagley assists. Let's take a look at that. So I haven't checked my sportsbook yet, but if I'm getting these types of odds, you're probably going to see it in the pinned comment. So Marvin Bagley. What else is there? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, over 2.5 first quarter assists. Now, this is only in the last 5 games. He's hit it in 4 of his last 5, 6 out of his last 10. The matchup is a great one. The Wizards do allow the second most assists to point guards, but he's only hasn't done it well against the Wizards in the past. So he's gone under in his last 2 games against the Washington Wizards. So that leaves me a little bit hesitant looking at the first quarter stuff. His recent form is okay, but SGA might just go out there and try to get 50 points, right? So that makes me a little bit hesitant. Denny Advia, his PRA of over 26.5. Now, he did have some really big games just before All-Star break, but he sucked today. So before the All-Star break, he was killing it. Came up against the Denver Nuggets, had 5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist. He's got a very difficult matchup. Check that out. The Thunder, the fewest points, the 3rd fewest rebounds, and the 2nd fewest assists allowed to small forwards. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games against the OKC Thunder. So, yeah, look, I'd definitely be leaning to the under for this pick, but given his form over his last 5, you might be hesitant to take the under, and I get that. So it might be a pick that's just not worth taking at all. What else do we have? Tyus Jones. It's pretty much Tyus Jones in most prop areas. Could be a good play. You can look at his first quarter points. You can look at his points plus his rebounds. Your boy's getting it done. I do like his points and assists the most based off everything I've seen. Let's have a look at J-Dub. So looking at his rebounds plus assists, over 9.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 5. Check that out. In terms of the matchup, look, the Wizards have they give everyone a good matchup, except for probably power forwards. So they do a good job on power forwards by the looks of things. But Jalen Williams has got it done against them before. Check that out. Last 3 games against the Wizards, he's had 10, 11, and 17. So most recently, 7 rebounds and 10 assists against the Washington Wizards. So 6 out of his last 10, but 4 out of his last 5. Let's check his home games. Last 10 home games for Jalen Williams. He's only covered this in 3 out of his last 10. Just having a quick look at injuries. There's no one noteworthy to call out. Apologies, Mr. Livers. But yeah, look, his form at home, that's a bit questionable, isn't it? He's only hit it in 3 of his last 10, but he has got it done against the Washington Wizards. So I'd probably lean to the over on this one, but it's not screaming at. Actually, that's a lie. I'm not even going to lean to it because I'm tracking my leans and I'm not leaning on that one. I don't like it. I don't like it enough. Not that I hate it. Oh my God, I'm rambling again. So they're the ones in the last 5. Looking at head-to-head matchups, let's check this out real quick. So we've got Chet Holmgren, 24.5 points and rebounds. So he's only versed the Washington Wizards once, but he did score 31 points and 4 rebounds. As a center, it's an easy matchup. Second easiest matchup for points, the easiest matchup for rebounds. 31 and 4 in their last matchup. In his last 10, he's covered this in 5 of those games, and in his last 5, he's covered it 3 times. So the matchup for this one is pretty good. But yeah, Chet has been a bit inconsistent for my liking. The matchup is excellent, don't get me wrong. Most centers, I would take it, but for Chet, he's not your traditional center that the Washington Wizards tend to struggle against. Has the length, but not necessarily the strength and the girth to do some damage. So that's not going to make my lean list at all. We got some more Tyus Jones action here. More Tyus Jones, Jalen Williams, and Kuzma rebounds and assists, but I wouldn't be interested in playing that either. So none of these other props are really screaming out to me. So not to say that there's probably no value out there, but based with the criteria and how we're looking, those aren't yelling out to me. But if we check just the unders, let's check the unders, right? So we see a lot of green on these. So the 2 players that scream out to me here is Josh Giddey's one. Let's go, Australia. And SGA rebounds and assists is another. So let's check out Josh Giddey. 18.5 points and rebounds. So he's gone under this in 5 consecutive games. He's gone under in 8 out of his last 10. right? The matchup, though, it's not great for this type of bet because the Wizards are terrible against shooting guards for points and rebounds. And in head-to-head matches, he has gone under in 2 out of his last 3 against the Washington Wizards. So for this one, I would definitely lean to the under because Josh Giddey's just not getting it done. He's obviously not getting the minutes. He's averaging 25 minutes a game. He's taking about 10 shots a game. So if he's taking 10 shots, he's making 4 to 5 of them. Well, he's making 4. Well, I'd have to make that up. 41% from the field. So if he's making 4 and he might make 2 3-pointers or a free throw, he's probably getting about 10 points. And rebound-wise, he's not destroying them on the glass either as of late. So I think Josh Giddey under that points and rebounds. That's going to make my lean list. Josh Giddey under 18.5 rebounds and points. So what else is there? We had SGA under 12.5 rebounds and assists. So in terms of the matchup, again, not a good one for this type of bet. And it's partly why we see the under in this one because the matchup is so good, they've had to lift the lines. I can pretty much guarantee you his line was not 12.5 in all of these games. So he's pretty much been very close to this 12.5. So I wouldn't be willing to take the under on this. In head-to-head matchups, though, he has gone under in his last 2. If I had to pick one on this play, it would be, I guess, an under, but yeah, it's not convincing enough for me to take that, even as a lean right now. So they're probably the main ones that I would look at after looking at all this. Kyle Kuzma, first quarter rebounds. So Kyle Kuzma has gone under 1.5 rebounds in 9 of his last 10 games, which is pretty crazy because this game against Denver, I think he had like 12 rebounds. But in the first quarter alone, only had 1 rebound. I wonder what that's all about. In head-to-head matchups, he did have 6 rebounds in his last game in the first quarter against OKC. So, yeah, look, this is interesting, but I wouldn't take that bet at all for Kyle Kuzma. Let's jump into the over and get into the next game. It's the Phoenix Suns versus the Houston Rockets. If we look at the last 10 firstly, nothing's screaming out to me right now. So let's have a look at Devin Booker's first quarter points. 8.5. Seems like a lot. Houston allowed the 5th fewest points to point guards in the first quarter. Devin Booker's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games, though. In the first quarter, he normally plays the whole first quarter, right? So the opportunities are definitely going to be there. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 2 out of his last 3 games against the Rockets. 1 matchup against them this season, but he only scored 5 points in that game, in that first quarter, not in that whole game. So, yeah, I'm not feeling that for Devin Booker already. All these other players looking at their last 10, obviously nothing screaming out. So if we look over the last 5, what do we get? We get told Dylan Brooks has been hitting this quite well over his last 5. So let's check that out. It's plus 100 odds. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 5 games. In his last 10, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Okay. Hasn't versed the Phoenix Suns as a member of the Houston Rockets. So the Houston Rockets are at home. Let's check out Dylan Brooks' last 10 games at home. And he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The matchup is a difficult one. The Phoenix Suns allow the 5th fewest points to small forwards on the season. So Dylan Brooks, sometimes I bet on you. Today, I am not going to. So, yeah, looking at the hit rates over the last 5, nothing really compelling. Looking at head-to-head form, though, let's see what comes up. Kevin Durant, over 1.5 assists. Head-to-head form, there's only 1 game to really call out. So, yeah, I know he got 3 assists last time, but over his last 10, nothing very convincing going on there. The matchup is pretty good, though. I could see it happening, but Kevin Durant burnt me on a prop today, so I'm not interested. So a lot of KD props, but that's because he had 1 good game, which shows his head-to-head record as being excellent. So I'm not screwing around with KD in this one. And nothing else leaping out of the page to me. Let's check the under. Maybe this could be the good game for under. Green machine. Let's go. All right. So the first one that gives me, we're looking at these 3. Şengün, Booker, actually these 2. Let's check out Alperen Şengün. So his points, rebounds, and assists, the line is at 34.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. Well, he's gone under in 7 out of his last 10. In terms of the matchup, the Suns allow the 8th fewest points, the 3rd fewest rebounds, but the 8th most assists to centers. So that's quite interesting. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 4 consecutive games against the Phoenix Suns. So I find that's quite interesting. So that makes me lean to the under as well for Şengün. I think the one thing you need to consider is, look, Phoenix just played today against the Dallas Mavericks. The Houston Rockets, did they play today? Actually, oh, they did. They versus the Pelicans. Sorry, I didn't bet on that game, so I forgot all about it. But so both teams are on back-to-back, which I think is fair. But even in this game, he had 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists, which is decent. But it's only 31 PRA. You'd be needing to get 35 in order to clear this. So, yeah, I like this pick, actually. Alperen Şengün. I'm going to put that on my lean list and get back to it after I finish recording. Alperen Şengün. Let me just have a quick look at his last 10 home games. Oh, okay, maybe I don't like it too much. So check this out. His last 10 home games, he's gone under only 3 times. So he's gone over this 7 of his last 10 games at home. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant. So I'm going to take that off my lean list because this scares me. And this is why it's so important to use something like Outlier.bet. Take your time, be a little bit thorough with it. Consider everything. Because if you just go off basic information, you're going to get basic results. So sometimes you've got to dive in a little bit deeper. So, Şengün, I'm not mucking around with you. But let's have a look at Devin Booker. So it would be an under on his PRA, which is 39.5. You get that at plus 100 odds. He just had a massive game against Dallas. 35 points, 5 rebounds, and 8 assists. The matchup is a good one if we're taking the under. The Rockets allow the 5th fewest points, 10th fewest rebounds, and the fewest assists to point guards. So that's very good for this play. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 2 of his last 3 games against Houston Rockets, but the main one that counts is this one because that's the only time they've played each other this season. And in that game, he had 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists, right? Which is 31. That's actually well under the PRA that we're looking for. It's not a bad game. And the Phoenix Suns won that game, but it's well under this 39.5. In this game, he scored 41 points against them. That's pretty crazy. One thing I do also like to look at, right? So he's gone under in 7 out of his last 10. He is capable of busting this wide open, right? If he has a massive game scoring the ball. But if we have a look at his season, he goes through these stretches. So this is 2023, 46 games. And in 46 games, he does go through these hot patches. Hot patch, hot patch, hot patch. So he goes through these patches where he's absolutely on fire. So the one thing that I'm worried about is this the start of another hot patch? Meaning, will he continue this? Or is this the outlier where he does it once? But right now, I'm still leaning on this pick. The matchup is good. Form over the last 10 is good. Form against the opponent is somewhat decent. I'm going to put that right on my lean list. Devin Booker, under his PRA. Okay. I'll get back to you later, Mr. Book. Actually, while I'm here, let's look at his last 10 games on the road. Last 10 road games, shit. He's only gone under 4 times. So Devin Booker might be a road warrior. He's gone over in 6 out of his last 10 road games. I'm not taking it off the list. I think this is still worth considering. It's just given me more to consider. So there's D Book. Who else have we got? Let's have a look at Grayson Allen. So we're looking at an under 15.5 points and rebounds. He's hit the under of this in 9 of his last 10 games. He lines up at the 3, but he plays both the 2 and the 3. But the matchup, we can say, is a good one. The problem, though, he's only got 1 matchup against the Rockets, which is this season, and he had 16 points and 4 rebounds. So that's an interesting one. Injury-wise, I've got to check it for this game. Bradley Beal is a game-time decision. So I wonder if Bradley Beal was playing in this game. Bradley Beal. Yes. Actually, no. So this is games without Bradley Beal. So Bradley Beal did not play in this game. So if we look at his last 10 games with Bradley Beal in the lineup, he's gone under in 8 of his last 10. Sacramento Kings, that is a good matchup. I know that for sure. I actually remember betting on that game. And Dallas, it's a good matchup for wings as well. So I think I'm going to lean the under on this one. Grayson Allen. Leaning the under on his points and rebounds, but I'm going to put a prerequisite there is if Bradley Beal is out. Actually, not Bradley Beal is out. Bradley Beal needs to be in. Bradley Beal is in. I'm taking this play. If Bradley Beal is out, I'm not going to touch it. Hopefully that makes sense. What else comes to mind here? Kevin Durant. So we know his recent form, pretty much already know this. His recent form is pretty good at covering this line, going under, sorry. But he did scorch the Phoenix Suns in their last match. I mean, the Houston Rockets in their last matchup. So the rest is Şengün, Jabari Smith Jr. Looking at his points line at under 12.5, you can get that for plus money. He's got an under in 7 out of his last 10. And his last matchup against Phoenix, which was this season, he only scored 9 points. He played 22 minutes, only attempted 5 shots. So looking at his last 10 games, he's averaging only 10 shots per game, but he's playing 30 minutes. So I'm a little bit hesitant to take that. I don't like betting on Jabari Smith Jr. anyway, but pretty much from this game, they're the main things that I would have to call out. So Devin Booker under in his PRA, and Grayson Allen under in his points and rebounds if Bradley Beal is playing. Okay, we're looking at the Miami Heat versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Same filters on. Let's look at the overs. First thing we're going to look at the last 10. Only thing in the green here is Brandon Ingram and his rebound prop in the first quarter. So you're getting odds of minus 110. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. The matchup is not a bad one. The Miami Heat allow their 9th most rebounds to shooting guards this season. He doesn't have a head-to-head matchup against them, though, in recent times. So that makes it a little bit difficult. In terms of injuries, what do we got here? Tyler Hero's game time, Richardson, Rozier out. And Brandon Ingram himself, he's a game time decision. So the lesson I learned today, if they're game time decisions, don't go near them. So you can see what this is pretty much telling me, right? So this is why I don't bet many Pelicans games and I don't bet many Miami Heat games. A lot of these players are quite inconsistent. So looking at their last 10, nothing screaming out to me. If we go through last 5, perhaps, if we want to be picky about recent form, we've got Tyler Hero up here as well. So he's a game time decision, but let's check him out. Looking at his assist prop in the first quarter, 1.5. It's plus 165. I don't mind that. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 5, but only 5 out of his last 10. He has covered this in 2 consecutive games against the Pelicans, though. Matchup-wise, the Pelicans do allow the second most assists to shooting guards on the season. Tyler Hero is probably playing a lot more point guard these days, though. So let's quickly check the point guard matchup, and it's a really difficult one. 5th fewest assists to point guard. So that makes it a little bit difficult. Tyler Hero, I'm not feeling it too much, to be honest, because it's only his last 5 games. All the other factors pretty much going against him. And what else do we have? Zion Williamson. He doesn't have head-to-head form. His last 10, that's a little bit suspect as well. So you'd really be betting on his recent form. But the one thing I want to play around with is how he goes with and without Brandon Ingram. So we can see he's killed this, his last 4 out of his last 5 games. Let's check him out without Brandon Ingram. He's only covered in 2 out of his last 5. So even that's not that great, is it? So not too keen on Zion Williamson. What else is there if we're looking in the last 5? Jimmy Butler, looking at his PRA, 32.5 is the line. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 5 games. The matchup is a difficult one, so you probably pick up Herb Jones. Last 10, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. So really, he's covered this in 6 out of his last 7 games. So his recent form is very good. Old Jimmy. Head-to-head matchups, he has gone under in 2 consecutive games against the Pelicans. So might be a difficult matchup for Jimmy in this one. Struggled against him in the past, but his recent form is great. But look, he's ticking 1 out of the 3 boxes. So I personally wouldn't take Jimmy, but just got to call out that his recent form is good. And look, this is why it's so important to use this as a shortcut, right? You want to see as many green lights as possible. The last few players have only had 1 green light. And where did we end up? It's like there's not enough evidence to support me taking this pick. If we want to look at the under, though, we might see a little bit more green in this one. So back to the last 10. What do we have? Duncan Robinson under in his PRA. Let's check Duncan out. It's 18.5. He's gone under in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup it's a good matchup for overs, right? So what we do want to check, because they do have a few injuries. Let's go Josh Richardson, Terry Rozier. His games without those 2 firstly, right? So he's gone under in 6 of 10, but he's gone over in his last 2. Now, if Tyler Hero does not play, what then happens to Duncan Robinson? He still goes under anyway. Okay. So the under, definitely on the cards. Hasn't played the New Orleans Pelicans recently, so we don't have any numbers for that. But his last 2 games were excellent. I don't know if I'm brave enough to take the under, to be honest. So that leaves me guessing. Other than that, there's nothing really screaming out, right? Like you've got Zion's rebounds, perhaps. He's gone under in 7 out of his last 10. His line's at 5.5. In terms of the matchup, pretty good if we like the under. The Miami Heat allow the 9th fewest rebounds to power forwards. So that I don't mind. But yeah, look, it's got to be very compelling in order for me to take an under. And that's not compelling at all. So, and if you guys were wondering, I have not looked at these lines prior to doing this. So a lot of these I'm seeing for the very first time, which is why my reaction is probably very shit. And I look like I'm lost because maybe I am. So yeah, looking at these unders, nothing really screaming out to me. Head-to-head unders, that doesn't yell out to me either. So let's jump into the next game. Hopefully we can find some juice. It's the Denver Nuggets versus the Portland Trailblazers. What looks nice and green to me? This appears quite green. Michael Porter Jr. over 1.5 rebounds in the first quarter. But first, let's check the injuries. KCP is a game time decision. For the Blazers, Brogdon is out. Scoot Henderson is out. Shaden Sharp's still out. Jabari Walker's a game time decision. So for this Denver-Portland game, if you're looking at an over, I'd probably just look at the first quarter anyway, because blowout is a risk. We saw the Denver Nuggets today against the Washington Wizards. They won the game by 20, but they were pretty much up by 20 points in the second quarter. So big blowout risk. A lot of their guys still played a lot of minutes though. But anyway, let's talk about MPJ. We're looking at minus 109 odds for him to get 2 rebounds in the first quarter. The matchup with the Blazers, somewhat difficult, ranking 12th in terms of rebounds allowed to power forwards. Sorry, small forwards. Against small forwards, they allow the 3rd fewest rebounds. So that's not good. But he's hit this in 8 of his last 10, 14 of his last 20, and he's hit this in 3 of his last 5 games against Portland. He's versed Portland twice this season, I believe. Yep, twice this season. And both of these were earlier this month. 2 rebounds and then 3 rebounds. So this wouldn't have changed too much. The matchup difficulty would have been just as difficult earlier in the season. Early in the season, I meant 3 weeks ago. So I'm not overly concerned about the matchup side of things. Recent form, it's not bad. But again, we're only getting minus 109. So if this was one of those plays where we were getting like plus 120, it's a bet that you'd take every single time. This bet, if you took it every single time, you probably would end up profitable. But at those odds, I'm not willing to take a gamble on it. But that's quite interesting. The next one, let's have a look at DeAndre Ayton, because sometimes he can really deliver, and I think he'll have a good matchup here. So line's at 15.5 points. You're getting plus money for this, plus 100. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10 games. The Nuggets allow the 7th most points to centers on the season. Now, this 50-year-old looking dog only scored 2 points against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm calling that out because I took the over for DeAndre Ayton in that game, and he was absolutely terrible, only scoring 2 points. It was a somewhat difficult matchup, but he had smoked the Minnesota Timberwolves prior to that. But yeah, I still don't like him a little bit because of that performance. But at the end of the day, I put the bet on, so I need to be accountable for that. Let's have a look at how he's gone against Denver. So he's versed the Nuggets twice, right? And this is the magic of DeAndre Ayton. 8 points in the first matchup, 27 points in the next matchup. Played 26 and then 38 minutes in those 2 games. Both of these games are on the road. So looking at his last 10, he's obviously got this in 8 out of his last 10. Let's check out his last 10 home games, though. And he's covered that in 7 out of his last 10. So if I had to, I'd probably lean to the over, but the thing is, I don't have to, right? So yeah, I'm not confident in taking DeAndre Ayton despite the numbers in his recent form. Maybe I'm hurt by that 2-point game against the Timberwolves, but I'm not willing to take it. Filtering through the last 5 games, do we see anything juicy? Okay, Michael Porter Jr., first quarter point. So MPJ in the first quarter, we might be able to get busy with him. So 4.5 points is his line. You get that for plus money, plus 105. Matchup is difficult. 3rd fewest points allowed to small forwards on the season, but he has hit this in 4 out of his last 5. He's also covered this in 5 consecutive games against the Portland Trailblazers. Now, I might be able to screw around with this one because in the first quarter of those games, he averaged 7.8 minutes. His last 5 games, he's averaging 8.5 minutes. So he's playing more minutes in his last 5 games compared to the 5 games where he did cover this against Portland. So at plus 105, what are we ticking? What boxes are we ticking off here? Recent form is good. The odds are where we want it to be. The matchup is not good, but his performance against the Portland Trailblazers says that he can most definitely do it. The only thing I would want to check is probably his last 10 games on the road. And if that checks out, we might be betting Michael Porter Jr. Oh, God. All right. Check this out. He's covered in 4 of his last 10 games on the road and 1 of his last 5 games on the road. So it's a good thing we've checked the home and away splits here, because if I didn't check this, I would have placed the bet already. Look, it's still a lean for me, to be honest, because his last road game against the Portland Trailblazers scored 5. So I think what this is telling me is most of the games he's played against them have been at home. That's right. His last 4 games against Portland have all been home games. So I'm actually not going to put this on my list. Actually, I'm going to put it on my list purely because I want to go back and reflect on this game. Porter Junior points. I'm not going to bet on this one. I'm telling you now. Points in the first quarter. So it's 4.5 points. So I'll be watching that game closely. We'll see how MPJ goes. And if he goes under, I'll be thanking my lucky stars I checked the home and away splits. But if he goes over, then I'll probably kick myself in the face. But over the last 5 games, there's nothing else that's screaming out to me here. If we look at head-to-head matchups, given the long history that these teams have, what have we got? Nikola Jokic, over 34.5 points and assists. So in head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 5 consecutive games against Portland. So that's good. The matchup, he's got a good matchup to score points, assists. It's not bad either, but it's not a great matchup. So his points and assists, he's covered in 5 of his last 6. If we look at his last 10 games, he's only covered in 5 of his last 10. But let's check the away splits because that might work in our favor. And it has not. So 5 out of his last 10 road games, he's covered this in. So, yeah. So what do we have? We have a somewhat decent matchup. Head-to-head form is... So that's him on the road. His last road game against Portland. This is in 2022, by the way. 33-9. So even that, you can dismiss... He's played them twice, and he's covered this with 39 and 36, but hasn't really necessarily covered it with ease. So, look, I'm a bit hesitant, so I'm not going to put that on my lean list, but I find that quite interesting. And DeAndre Ayton, check this out. 1 assist in the first quarter. That's interesting. You can get that for plus 133. He's covered this in his last 2 games against Denver, so that's interesting. And looking at his last 10 games, he's covered it 6 times. Checking his last 10 games at home, he's only covered it 2 out of 10 games. So, and this is why it pays to use something like Outlier. You can do your deep dives. You often might think you have a good pick, and then you research it a little bit further, and then you're like, shit, it's not a good pick at all. So, DeAndre Ayton, I'll have to pass on that. But yeah, you guys have to check out Outlier because there's so many different things you could be doing with this right now. This is just how I use it. But you really have to play around with it to figure out your own strategy. If you're interested, obviously there's a link in the description. It's a free trial. Take advantage of that. I know a lot of you guys are clicking it anyway, so I'm going to stop overselling it. Let's have a look at the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, shall we? The first player that we see screaming out to us is Brook Lopez. So we've got his PRA, his points and rebounds, and his assist prop. What we're going to do, we'll look at his PRA because that's going to cover all 3. So first thing to call out in terms of the matchup, he's got a difficult matchup for points, difficult matchup for rebounds, and assists is in the middle. Not good nor bad. He's covered this line in 8 of his last 10 games. This is a road game for the Bucks, so he's covered this in 7 of his last 10 road games. He's actually covered this in 5 road games in a row, so that's pretty good. And if we look at head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 2 out of his last 3 games against the Minnesota Timberwolves. But keep this in mind, he only finished on 19, right? So it's not like he smashed it. This is too close for comfort. I think this line is pretty much spot on. I'm not willing to take it. Quick look at the injuries, though. Giannis, Connaughton, Gallinari, all game time decisions. Chris Middleton is out. So Giannis doesn't miss too many games these days. So what I'd be interested in is maybe how does Brook Lopez play without Giannis? Okay. So this season, it's only been 2 games without Giannis. But in prior years, he killed it without Giannis. 8 out of his last 10, 14 of his last 20 going over. But yeah, I'm not feeling it. I think there's too many reasons not to pick it. And I honestly think that line is right on the money. He could finish on 19 again, or he could get hooked. Could finish on 18, right? So let's have a look at this man, Rudy Gobert. So we're looking at his first quarter rebounds. Line's at 3.5, and you can get that for plus money. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. Last game against Portland, he had 9 rebounds in the first quarter. Matchup-wise, the Bucks are the 8th most rebounds to centers on the season. Looking at head-to-head matchups, 2 matchups here. One in 2022, so I won't put too much stock into that. But his last game against the Milwaukee Bucks about 2 to 3 weeks ago, he had 4 rebounds in the first quarter, and he covered this line. That was a road game as well, so they're back at home now. So he's covered this 7 out of his last 10. Let's check his last 10 games at home. Last 10 games at home, he's covered this 6 times. So, yeah, I'd probably lean to the over, to be honest, for Rudy. But, yeah, he's got the odds. His recent form's okay. Form against the opponent is okay. But 3.5 rebounds in the first quarter is a lot. Rudy plays 9 minutes on average in the first quarter. So you don't get a full quarter out of him. You pretty much need him to get like a rebound every 2 minutes. So I'll pass. Thank you, Rudy. Thanks for coming. And who else is there? Let's have a look at this one here. Mike Conley, first quarter points. So we know the Bucks don't defend point guards quite well. They allow the 4th most points to point guards on the season. Over his last 10 games, Mike Conley has covered this. Well, you really just need him to make a bucket, right? So he's basically covered this in 6 out of his last 10, but he's covered this in 4 out of his last 5. Really, he's covered in 5 out of his last 6. In head-to-head matchups, he did score 3 points the last time these guys played in the first quarter. So again, just needs to make 1 bucket. You're getting 50-50 odds here. On the season, he's hit it at 54%, last 20 at 55%, last 10 at 60%, and his last 5 at 80%. So his recent form is very good. His form over the season is better than what the odds indicate. The matchup is a good one against the Milwaukee Bucks. How many minutes does he play? But Mike Conley only plays 6.9 minutes in the first quarter. So if you're going to sweat, you're not going to be sweating for long. That's all I'll say on this one. So, yeah, I think that's interesting. What I'm going to do is drop this down. I'm not going to take this bet, but I just think it's really interesting to take note of, and then I'll watch the game with some intrigue, because if he does make a bucket nice and early, then it's an opportunity gone missing. But let's check his last 10 games at home. Maybe that makes it easier for us. Right. 6 out of his last 10 games at home he's covered in. So, again, that still leaves me a little bit hesitant, but I think that's interesting. Mike Conley. We've looked at Brook Lopez rebounds already. And then, yeah, there's nothing else screaming out to me. Filtering by the last 5 games, we see much of the same props that we've been through. And if we look at the head-to-head, yeah, there's not too much happening here either. All right, so let's check the unders for this game. So Mike Conley PRAs come up in this one. Under 19.5 PRAs. He's gone under in 8 of his last 10 games. The matchup, if you're looking at the under, it's good for his assist, not bad for his rebounds. Points-wise, it's not a great one. And in head-to-head matchups, he did have 32 PRAs in their last matchup. 18 points, 5 rebounds, 9 assists. And I'm not overly surprised by that, because the Bucks don't defend point guards very well. So even though his recent form says take the under all day, every day, that form against the Bucks is enough to scare me off. So I won't be touching that. We've got Giannis, under 17.5 rebounds and assists. That could be an interesting one, especially if he's a game time decision. He's gone under 17.5 in 7 out of his last 10 games. Matchup is a difficult one. The Timberwolves allow the 3rd fewest rebounds and the fewest assists to power forwards on the season. But he's killed them in the past. So this is 2022. He had 14 rebounds, 11 assists. Then he had 20 rebounds and 5 assists. But then most recently, 3 weeks ago, he had 3 rebounds and 7 assists against them. He played 27 minutes, But the Timberwolves did blow the Bucks out, right? And the Bucks, they're not playing well right now, so there's a chance that this could happen again, right? This is a road game, another game in Minnesota. So I wonder how Giannis has been going on the road. On the road, he's only gone under in 5 of his last 10. So he had been playing great. How many games? What's their record with Doc Rivers? Like 3-7 or something like that. So if we have a look at that, if I hope I haven't made that up. If Doc Rivers has been there for 10 games, Giannis has gone under in 7 of them. So yeah, I don't mind the under here for Giannis, but minus 119, I don't like it now. So one to watch, Giannis under in his rebounds and assists. I think it's worth shopping around to see what type of odds you can get. But yeah, nothing else is screaming out to me in this game. Let's jump into the next one. It's the Charlotte Hornets versus the Golden State Warriors. Charlotte Hornets, great team to bet on because they got some juicy shit happening. Let's check their last 10 games. All right. So looking at this one in the last 10, we don't see the green lights that I like to see, but let's muck around with it for a bit. Firstly, let's have a look at Jonathan Kuminga. Looking at his assist prop. So his line for this one is 2.5. Minus 104 odds. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10. The matchup is decent. The Hornets allow the 10th most assists to power forwards on the season. And Jonathan Kuminga is playing at home in this one. So if we look at his last 10 games at home, he's only gone over in 5 of his last 10. So that makes me a little bit hesitant. Looking at his games against the Charlotte Hornets, he's gone under in both of them. So all we really have to tick off here is recent form is good and the positional matchup is good, but form against the opponent's not good, and his form at home is not convincing enough for me to take. Cody Martin. Now, I just took Cody Martin over 4.5 rebounds at plus money today, and God, that was sweaty. I think, yeah, he finished on 5 rebounds, right, against Utah. I think he had 4 rebounds in the first quarter and didn't get his 5th rebound to the last minute of the game. So he was stressing me out. I've already lost a lot of hair, so I was losing more thanks to this guy. But let's talk a bit more about Cody Martin. In terms of the matchup, we're looking at shooting guards and small forwards. A somewhat difficult matchup. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. So recent form is good. He's hit this in 6 games in a row now. So that's good. Doesn't have a head-to-head matchup with the Golden State Warriors. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to ascertain. And looking at away games, he's hit this in 3 of his last 10 games on the road. So that makes me quite hesitant to take it. So I won't be taking Cody Martin in this one. What else do we have going on here? Andrew Wiggins, first quarter points. Oh, I don't like betting on Andrew Wiggins, but let's have a look at this. So the matchup is great. The Hornets allow the second most points to small forwards on the season. Andrew Wiggins' recent form's pretty good. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 7 games. He's gone over his first quarter points. We can get this at plus 100. Against the Hornets, the last time they played, this was in 2022, though. He only scored 3 points. He played 8 minutes in the first quarter. These days, he's playing, 7 to 8 minutes in the first quarter on average. So you basically need him to get 2 buckets to cover this 3.5 points. Matchup is good. Recent form is good. Let's check out his form at home. And it's not bad. 5 out of his last 10, but 4 out of his last 5. He's covered this. I'm going to have to put this as a lean. Lean for now for Andrew Wiggins. What else do we see? Draymond Green, over 2.5 first quarter points. I'm not betting on Draymond. I listen to his podcast, though. Let's check out Steph Curry. Checking out over 39.5 PRA against the Charlotte Hornets. So he's covered this in 5 out of his last 6 and 6 out of his last 10 games. The matchup with the Hornets is difficult for points and easy for assists and in the middle for rebounds. Head-to-head matchups. Last time he versed them was in 2022. 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists. But Steph Curry starting to age quite quickly, playing extremely well, though. Let's check out his games at home. Jesus, check this out. So Steph Curry's covered this line in 6 consecutive games at home. Now you've got my interest, so I don't mind that at all. So we know that his recent form is okay. His form at home since the end of January is excellent, so almost a month. And then, this is his recent form. So it's not too bad. He can really fill up the stat sheet, this bloke. Wonder what his points prop is. Do we see the same numbers if we do like this? 6 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 6 straight games at home. So at home, he scored 30 plus points in 6 straight games, but the matchup is a bit difficult on just points alone. So PRA might be the way to go. He's covered in 6 straight games at home. So not only can he contribute points-wise, he's getting a lot of assists, but it really is the points which is driving this over. So the line for this is also 12.5. So there's a blowout risk. You can actually filter using Outlier all the games where they're favored. So you can say any game where the Warriors, let's say they win by more than 10. In games where the Warriors have won by 10, Steph Curry's covered this in 5 of his last 10, but he has covered it in 3 straight. So if you have a script on the outcome of the game, this is another way that you could use it. But yeah, look, I'm a little bit hesitant now the more I look at Steph Curry. Other than that, there's nothing screaming out to me for the over. Where's my man Trey Man? Trey Man not coming up. Ah, right. LaMelo Ball's a game time decision, so Trey Man markets aren't available. That's interesting. So LaMelo Ball could come back. I wouldn't bet on him in his first game back anyway. We've got Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges. Highly inconsistent, though. If we're looking at head-to-head, none of those guys seem to come up. So, yeah, nothing screaming out to me in this game, I've got to say. Wiggins' first quarter points, though, that could be an interesting one. So let's have a look at the... Actually, I didn't even look at the unders. Let's check the unders real quick. My bad. Okay, we don't have the green lights that I'm looking for. Draymond, under 15.5 points and assists. Let's have a look at that. Plus 100. He's gone under in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup is good for the under for points, not so much for assists. But he hasn't been getting the assists the way that he used to anyway. In head-to-head matches, he's only got the 2. He did go under in his last one. Both of these games in 2022, though. And looking at his last 10 games at home, Draymond's gone under in 5 of his last 10. So not a real compelling argument to take the under there for Draymond. There actually isn't a compelling argument for many. Or it could be someone like Brandon Miller, right? So I'm thinking here, the Hornets do have more depth after the trade, especially in their backcourt. LaMelo Ball could be coming back as well. Could mean less usage rate for Brandon Miller. So he's gone under in 5 out of his last 10, but he's gone under in, 5 of his last 6, really. So I think this is after the trade deadline. The trades happened, and Brandon Miller's production went down. His minutes are still somewhat decent, but his shot attempts have come back down. So I don't mind that. The matchup, difficult. The Warriors allow the fewest assists. And points, it's not good nor bad. Okay. Let's check out. So we know Brandon Miller's recent form is great, and we know that that's happened after the trade deadline. So this is the new baseline for him. Matchup is difficult. So, yeah, Atlanta. So he scored 26 points and got 4 assists. The Atlanta Hawks are notorious for giving up everything to shooting guards. So that is an easy matchup for him. Plus, the Hornets beat them by 30. So the whole team must have been on song. So I don't mind this. I don't mind what I'm finding out right here. Now let's take a look at Brandon Miller's last 10 games on the road. He's gone over in 4 of his last 10. He's gone under in 6. But these 3 were obviously before the trade deadline, but after they moved Rozier and with no LaMelo Ball in the lineup. What I think could be interesting, let's check out his last 10 games with LaMelo Ball in the lineup. He's gone under in 6 of, he's actually gone under in 14 of 19 games with LaMelo Ball in the lineup. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this as a lean as Brandon Miller under points and assists if LaMelo plays. So that's just my lean right now. If LaMelo's in, we're taking the Brandon Miller under. All right, let's jump into the last game. It's the San Antonio Spurs versus the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm sure we're going to see every man and his dog as game time decisions in this one. Looking at the over, though, what do we see? Green lights for D'Angelo Russell. Check this out. This almost looks like Christmas. So, what do we got here? Firstly, let's check to see how LeBron's going. LeBron's a game time decision. Cam Reddish is a game time decision. Vanderbilt, Vincent Wood all out. So, what that means, so Anthony Davis, not a game time decision on a back-to-back. Are you kidding me? This is a new man. All right, let's have a look at this. So in his last 10 games, he's got 2 assists in the first quarter in 7 out of his last 10 games. Right. Matchup wise, the Spurs allow the 6th most assists to point guards on the season. Head to head wise, he's only versed them once this year. He had 5 assists in the first quarter in that game. So that's pretty excellent. But again, small sample size. We know that the Lakers are at home. So let's check out D'Angelo Russell's last 10 home games. And he's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 home games. We know that he gets more assists with LeBron James out of the lineup. Let's check to see how he does with LeBron James in the lineup. So those are his last 7 games at home with LeBron James. These are his last 10 games without LeBron James at home. So still 6 out of 10. So the form is positive. The matchup is a good one. The odds are great too. I think I'm going to take this bet, unless there's something that I'm missing. Let me just have a look. Minutes wise, he's playing 9 minutes per first quarter. We need him to get 2 assists. You can most definitely get that. In terms of pace factor, both of these teams high up there on pace, which is pretty good. So Spurs, 3rd highest pace, and the Lakers, the 6th highest pace. So if there's a lot of pace, a lot of chances to get these assists for D'Lo. Whether it be Anthony Davis, who should be primed to have a big game against Wemby, or whether it's LeBron or Taurean Prince, whoever it is, I don't mind this. I'm taking it. D'Lo, over 1.5 assists. First quarter. Boom shakalaka. Give me those green lights, baby. All right. What else do we see? So we've got D'Lo's PRA. What this is telling me, he's been hitting it well recently, but he didn't get it the last time he played the Spurs. So he had 12 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists last time they played. The matchup is but there's a lot of scoring weapons. In their last 10 games, though, 7 out of his last 10. Last 10 games at home, 5 out of his last 10. So the line might be just about right there for D'Lo, so I'm not keen for that. Let's have a look at LeBron James. Points line, 23.5 at the moment. The matchup's somewhat difficult. Not difficult at all. Sorry, I take that back. Middle of the road. LeBron's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. Against the Spurs, he's only hit this in 1 of his last 4. So that makes it quite difficult. If we look at his last 10 games at home, he's actually covered in 7 out of his last 8, really. He's hit this line, but he hasn't hit it very well. And look at minus 119 odds. I'm not playing around with that. So LeBron, you can go back to your retirement home. Outside of that, nothing screaming out to me. Last 5, same old stuff. Let's check Devin Vassell real quick, because he's someone that I was considering taking to score points. He scored like 29 something points, and I didn't take it. I didn't even consider it long enough. So looking at his rebounds and assist prop, minus 106. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 5. The game he didn't hit it, he finished on 8. So he got very close. The matchup is okay. The Lakers give up a lot of assists. Head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 3 of his last 5 games against the Los Angeles Lakers. They played each other twice this year. In both of those games, he had 9 rebounds and assists. So, yeah, look, he's not absolutely crushing this. He's just going over by half a rebound or half an assist. So the hit rate is good, but at minus 106, it's probably right, to be honest. The line's quite sharp there, so I'm not willing to play around with that. The only person I probably want to look at, right, and this is where Outlier can teach you so much, but one thing you need to know is if Wemby's playing, the opposition big man is probably going to have a massive erection walking into this game. So I want to look at Anthony Davis. Points and rebounds. His line is at 38.5, which is huge, but he has hit this in 3 of his last 5. He's not consistent and he never will be. The matchup is excellent. The Spurs allow the most points to centers. When they last matched up, AD had 37 points and 10 rebounds. That's what I'm talking about. Prior to that, there was no Wemby in these 3 games, so that's the main one that I'm looking at, the Wemby factor. So Anthony Davis points and rebounds, that's not a trend-related thing. That's more the matchup up against Wemby. But he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Looking at home games, he's only hit this in 4 out of his last 10. But just checking to see the games to get up for, what you'll tend to find is if Anthony Davis probably loves the bigger games, and this game against Wemby there's going to be a lot of attention on that one. So yeah, this isn't a pick based on numbers, right? This is just gut feel and vibe. But I'm thinking Anthony Davis over 38.5 points. And how many rebounds did he have against these guys again? Let me just check this shit out. All right, 37 points and 10 rebounds. So I probably wouldn't even take the rebounds. I might even just look at his points because that's where the matchup is the best. In 3 of his last 4 against the Spurs, he's covered it in 11 of his last 20, 5 of his last 10, and 3 of his last 5. Points line at 24.5, minus 110. I think I'm going to take that one. I'm going to take it. Let's just see how my vibe's going. If he doesn't hit this, then my vibe can go eat shit, and we should just stick to the numbers. So, taking the Anthony Davis over 24.5 points. I love that Wemby matchup. But outside of that, nothing else screaming out to me from this game. Quick look at the under. We don't see a whole lot of green lights. So, I think we might just leave it at that.
All right. So, I switched up the strategies today. I didn't go through every single player. I went through the players that got my attention and I explained to you my thought process around whether to make those picks or not. And I did this with the intention of making a shorter video. But lo and behold, here we are again. Almost 2 hours of research. Well, it'll be less than 2 hours after I've done my editing, of course, but almost 2 hours worth of research on these NBA player props. I do hope you guys appreciate all the effort that I go through. Obviously, this is all for free. I'm not charging you guys an absolute cent. So let me know in the comment section, did you like the style of today's video, or do you prefer me to go faster through more players where I might even touch on players where I would never even consider taking the pick? Or do you like the thought process around this where I take you through outlier.bet? Let me know in the comments section below. But remember, sign up to Outlier, free trial in the link below. Take advantage of it. Do what I've just done. Do it at the same time, or don't use it at all. It doesn't bother me, but there is a free trial and it's there for all of you guys, my viewers. If you guys are interested in seeing more of my content, because if you thought 2 hours wasn't enough for me, check out the interview right here. Check this interview out. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Up to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.